All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Douglas Show. It is my pleasure today to welcome on former Redskins linebacker Robert Henson. Robert, how are you?
Doing good, Doug. How's it going, man?
It's going good. I don't know if you knew this or not, or if anybody, I'm sure most don't. Year 3 of the podcast, you were the very first guest
Yeah.
on the Big Douglas Show. I believe we did a defensive breakdown on Ron's first off season. So
Correct.
it's been too long since we've
Right.
had you back, and nice to have you back.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you having me back on, man. It was always a good time when I'm joining. It was fun the first time. I'm excited to do it again.
Now, let's see. You got to tell me you were there for the Zorn year. That was a decent football team that I think people expected more of. It had to have been wild in the building, though, with Zorn there. I'm curious what you kind of remember about that team. And is Washington where you had expected to go? You got drafted in the 6th round. Like, what were they telling you? Where did you think you were going? And maybe some other teams that had reached out to you.
Yeah, that Washington team was, man. We had some key veterans on that team that were, in their prime or at the end of their prime. Obviously, CP, Santana Moss, Big Griff in the middle. You got Andre Carter on the outside. We had some talent. London in the middle, obviously. It was a little bit weird from that standpoint with Zorn because he was soft spoken. He really didn't have command of the locker room like you would think. So a lot of players just kind of did what they wanted to do, if that makes sense. So he was attempting to be a player's coach is what it felt like to me. Obviously, being a rookie, he asked me to run through a wall. I would have done that. As far as pre-draft, I was talking to some other teams, Houston and Indianapolis, New England, Miami. Those are some teams that I had a lot of conversation with. Jacksonville prior to the draft process. No communication with Washington at all. I had no idea that I would be going to that to Washington, but actually in the 4th round, Indianapolis called me and had conversations about, hey, we're going to take you here, this, that, and the other. And then I can't remember who they drafted. I think they drafted an offensive lineman, if I'm not mistaken, but that clearly didn't happen. So those are the type of things people don't really know about in the draft process. You do get phone calls and you think, this is my moment, this is my opportunity, and that team just doesn't pull the trigger. They go another direction or whatever the case may be. So happy to have Washington, though, follow through with it.
How long did it take to kind of get a feeling that that regimen with Zorn wasn't going to work? Like, could you see it right away, or did it take some time? Because actually the team started off pretty hot, as I recall, that year.
Yeah. So I'd be lying to you if I said that you could pick up on a moment or a time. The only thing that really sticks out to me was, again, just the beginning of the year, going into that Giants game where Zorn is telling, Clinton he needs to get in and into practice and see a blitz that the Giants do, and Clinton was like, "No, I'm okay." Like, he's like, I played the Giants a lot. I know exactly what they're doing. But that, to me, as a rookie, I remember that, hearing that and seeing that, going, "What? Like,
Right.
Are you serious?" And it wasn't a slight. It's not a slight to CP at all or anything like that. It's just that let me know I was in a different environment. But for the majority of the year, I was caught up in my own success, how much I played, even special teams, things of that nature. I was just trying to understand my role and my responsibility throughout that whole year, and it really just didn't. It felt like a dream until probably week 12 or 14, and then at that point you go, "Oh wait, we're not as good as I thought we are." So you kind of wake up and start seeing what's around you as you understand your role and your responsibility.
And then the next year, Shanahan comes in, right? Couldn't have been two different styles of coaches, I imagine.
Absolutely. Shanahan was, he wanted everything changed. He's like, we've been losing for too long. How about we just change the paint in the entrance, or change the locks, or whatever. He's like, I want everything changed. This is a new team, new building, everything. I want all these things changed. So he even changed admins and the secretaries and things of that nature. So those are the type of things that come with a rebuild. But Shanahan was more vocal about and more honest about where we were as a team, and the expectation was a lot different. He made it known every moment, every meeting, everything was magnified, especially with Jim Haslett, and then my linebacker coach at the time. It's just a different attitude. It was, we got the talent to do it now. Let's try to figure out how to do it now. Now that success didn't come until after I left, that 2012 moment, but you could feel it starting to change in the atmosphere.
It was odd watching it from the outside with the Haynesworth situation. I'm curious what it felt like in the building.
Man, it was a lot of, I can tell you right now, and a lot of players probably won't admit this, was a lot of jealousy. Because just from a standpoint of he could do what he wanted to do. I remember him showing up for meetings late just to grab coffee, or parking in parking spots that he knew he couldn't park. Just it felt like he felt like $100 million man in that building. Especially that first year, it was just like he can't do nothing wrong. And then the differences between the coaches started to seep in. I remember actually I was in the locker room when Greg Bloch came in after we lost that Raiders game. It was the end of the year. Yeah, so we lost that game, and then he came in and he just went off on me, exploded. I was the only one in the locker room at the time, getting ready to work out. He exploded. He just went off. It's my fault for drafting you lazy, in my first, this, that, and the other, da, 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 da. And I went, I ain't even play really this year. I'm just special teams, you know what I mean? I apologize. I mean Haslett. So not Bloch, Haslett. But that's the type of energy that there was. So a lot of players were envious that they wouldn't say anything like that to Albert, but everybody else caught the wrath, if that makes sense. So those are the type of things that started to make that regime lose their credibility, if that makes sense.
It does. Words out that Dan Snyder is selling. Did you guys see him much back then? Was he around? I know he's not like now, but it feels like I was told that back in those days he was around a lot more.
He was definitely around a lot more. I remember going to Halloween parties at his house. I remember charity events and things of that nature that happened, that he supported, that players did. The biggest one that sticks out to me was Lorenzo Alexander's, his ACES Foundation. Dan was a big supporter of that. During practice, you used to look over, see him on the sideline watching certain players, talking to certain players, whatever the case may be. It was very clear that he had his favorites, but he made an effort to pretty much get to know everybody or talk to everybody at some point. But he was definitely around a lot more. He was in the building more. We hung out just as a team, and he was at those functions a lot more.
Just statistically, I mean, just if you run the numbers, to have owned the team for this long and not to be able to even kind of stumbled into more success, do you have an idea of what it was? I mean, I know he's done some things that people don't appreciate, but just to have the organization for 20 years, you'd think you'd have some winning. What he's tried it 3-4 different types of ways. What do you think it is that stood in his way of being more successful there?
That's hard because in order to say things like that, we have to be in his shoes, just running the team wise. Now, obviously, I think the culture that we know now that we're outside of it now, and some of the things that have come out, and the culture played a big factor in that. If it makes it just, you can tell that it played a bigger factor when you think about those years and all those things that went down from all the information that we have now. Being an owner, I would say, probably one of the hardest things ever. It's like having a Ferrari and not driving it. Like, you got to trust somebody else to drive it. So I would think that he didn't trust the right individuals. If I just had to point to one individual thing, he wanted to play Jerry Jones and not, and build his own team and have these specific relationships with players that he liked and kept them, as opposed to keeping it fresh, making sure you're bringing in new talent to compete with even your favorites and not keeping those guys too long.
You are a TCU alumni, so I'm sure that you were excited about the big game. It didn't go the way you wanted to, I'm sure. As a lifelong Bulldog fan, I was excited about it, but
Oh,
uh, how did where it was a big jump for the program. Are you still close with the program, and do you think it's something that they can sustain now going forward?
absolutely. So the Michigan win in itself, the whole season in itself was crazy, but the Michigan game really, I believe, solidified us as we were a tier 3 team. In my opinion, we jumped up to a tier 4 team. You can see it by the recruits that we got in this year. Some players that weren't worried about opening their door to TCU are now open to going to TCU. So that tells me we took a different jump. We're on another tier, but I mean, when I think about it, the first play of that Georgia game, I knew it was a difference because Max Duggan went for that read option. Defensive end crashed down on the running back and still made the play on Max, and I went, yeah, it's a different type of athlete. So we still got some work to do to be, consistent and be on that 5th tier with the Georgias, the Alabamas, and things of that nature. But I think they're headed in the right direction. Sonny Dykes has done a phenomenal job, and it looks like he knows the type of athletes they need to get that done. So I think it's just a building block.
It really shows you how important coaching is. He did
Absolutely.
an incredible job. It's funny, I don't normally feel bad for the opposition, but that thing got out of hand early, and I kind of felt bad for him a little bit.
So in my mind, I was like, you know what? At least we made the national championship. This is something I would have dreamed of, even if we would have lost it as a player playing at
Right.
TCU. It's something we always dreamed of. BCS, BCS. And for those guys to go out and get that done, and at least get to that game, to me, that showed everybody that we belong, and we are definitely another step up now in those tier teams.
Does Duggan translate to the NFL? Is that like a guy that the Commanders should be interested in the 6th round or something around there?
I mean, Duggan's a rallier, and and it's weird because he doesn't say much, but you can tell, he bleeds on the field. Um, he's a leader. You can tell he's a leader. As far as how he translates to the NFL, it's going to be interesting to see. But as we saw from the Senior Bowl, him being voted
Yeah.
valuables, I think there's an opportunity there. I'm not saying he's a first round guy, but I think it's a guy you take a hard look at in the 3rd, 4th round, and see what kind of value he brings to your team.
Robert, as we look back on this Commander season, what do you think it was? What went wrong that they couldn't get to where they were hoping to go? To me, the roster is pretty good. Maybe the best roster they've had since maybe 2016 with those Kirk years. I mean, is it simply just Ron can't get the quarterback right, or what did you see this year that kind of kept them from getting where they wanted to go?
Well, I can tell you from experience, when you constantly playing the, hopscotch with the quarterbacks and changing quarterbacks, and I kind of trust this guy, but I really don't trust this guy. Just the team picks up on that confidence, all that lack of confidence, and then it all goes downhill from there. And you could see at times that the defense was frustrated with the lack of creativity on the offense or their ability to sustain drives. So, I mean, you keep those guys on the field all day, you're bound to take some L's. And then I think Ron just situational awareness, right? I think we lost in situational awareness this season. Just not having the right play calls on 3rd downs or key moments of the game, just making silly decisions, not knowing that a playoff berth is at stake, things of that nature. Like to me, that's
Yeah.
just some of that stuff is unexcusable. Um, I know we've had issues with consistency at the head coach position, but at this point, he's on a hot seat this season. It's got to be. He was on a hot seat this past season. If you ask me, changing offensive coordinator, blaming Scott Turner is not going to do anything. You got to address the quarterback position.
No doubt, and they tried, but they've whiffed on it each year. And I like Scott Turner. I was a big Scott Turner fan and truther. Fact of the matter is that the play designs work, guys were open, but what to me at least, what he lacked in was piecing the plays together. Like running this play, knowing you can come back to something similar
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 plays down the line. I mean, when you get the run game going and you never bootleg the quarterback out or run the play action,
There's no
that
threat.
to me was more frustrating. That's what I'm hoping we'll get in the next offensive coordinator is somebody, you know, we hear this all the time, right? Either forcing guys to play into a system, the really good guys, the really good coordinators take what they've got and work a system around that. It sounds like Eric Bieniemy maybe has the first crack at that. Is that something that excites you?
It is. We've all seen what he's capable of. Obviously, in the championship game again this year, Super Bowl. This guy sharing that play calling ability with Andy Reid, he'll be able to draw some of that knowledge from Andy Reid. Just because the guy leaves the building, if he does come to Washington, just because the guy leaves the building, don't mean you lose relationships. So that tells me that he'll still have that relationship with Andy to be able to bounce some things off and or whatever the case may be, and just the type of quarterback that he got, right? He had Patrick Mahomes, they had Alex Smith, so they got it done with different type of quarterbacks. So just that knowledge and that experience, I think, will be definitely valuable to Washington, and just that creativity. This would be his first opportunity to call plays on his own. So to me, he would be my front runner for that position.
Well, and particularly it'd be his first opportunity to call plays where nobody was worried or wondering whether he was the one calling plays, right? Is
Right.
that the best way to set it up in your mind? A defensive-minded head coach with a offensive play caller that is obviously in charge of the play calling, or do you like a head coach that's more offensive-minded with a defensive coordinator that just kind of does his own thing with that side of the ball, or does it matter?
I don't think it really matters, in my opinion. I mean, we've seen the league or teams in the league have success with, both styles, different styles. Me personally, I would prefer offensive coach who works with his offensive coordinator. That defensive coach thing coming from TCU. You had a lot more eyes on you on the defensive side with Gary Patterson out there because he was a defensive head coach. So. Just from accountability standpoint, there's a difference, but I think the more heads you get in the game on offense, on the offensive side of the ball, makes a bigger difference.
My Twitter question of the day yesterday was pick 3, Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Deron Payne, or pick 2 of the 3.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you picked Deron and Chase.
Correct.
Which actually was surprised. Most of the Twitter folk, this could be recency bias, were picking Payne and Sweat. I'm assuming you would think that Chase Young has the much higher ceiling.
Absolutely. So it's not a slight to Montez Sweat at all, but I just think Chase has a higher ceiling, and then I want to keep that inside core. Right, that's very difficult to come up with. You keep the Deron Paynes, you keep the Jonathan Allens, and let Fedarian still get his footing. I mean, he did flash at times last year before the injury, but he's not Deron Payne, and we can't act like Deron doesn't bring something valuable to the team. And Chase Young's leadership can't be quantified. To be so young and to already be so vocal and have the ear of the locker room, those are the type of guys you need. Sweat's speed and athleticism is just freak ability, but I feel like you got more chances of coming across that again in the draft. But those two things that Chase Young and Deron Payne do, you can't be quantified.
It feels like the NFL will go in a certain direction, and then all of a sudden the whole thing pivots. I'm curious your thoughts. It feels like the last couple of years, we have been in these spread offenses, receivers everywhere, big points. The way to combat that, right, is to put big running backs on the field and start pounding the rock again. Do you think we're getting ready to move and pivot again and get back to this notion of being able to pound the rock, particularly when teams are putting 5 DBs on the field almost all the time?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, the game is changing. The players' physiques are changing, right? Everybody's getting bigger, faster, stronger. In some key areas, you're starting to see linebackers at that, 6'1", 6'3", 225, looking more like safeties. So I would say those bigger running backs definitely get the job done now because obviously defensive players are changing. But the game always does that pivot, right? Around that 5-10 year mark, it always does that pivot. And I truly believe that the spread offenses will still be who they are because of whoever is coaching them. But we are starting to get back to that pound the rock. You look, pains me to say this. Just look at Philly this year. They found different ways to pound the rock. Not bigger running backs. I wouldn't consider Miles Sanders a big running back, but they found different ways to pound the rock. It's definitely a good way to control that clock and control those spread teams.
Commanders fans continue to say that we haven't gotten the linebacker position figured out. Feels like Jamin Davis took a big jump this year. I'm curious your thoughts on Holcomb. Is he worth bringing back, or do they need to? Should they be looking to upgrade? Say a Tremaine Edmonds gets out of Buffalo, and do you need to have three linebackers the way you used to?
I think the game is changing where you don't need the three linebackers that you used to have. When you look at it, how many snaps are actually being played in base defense as opposed to nickel, as opposed to – I think you need the guy that's versatile, Jamin Davis, who's athletic and versatile. The big thumpers have left the game, and I don't see that changing anymore. I don't see that changing anytime soon. So, like I said, those bigger guys who just run downhill and thump, those – I mean, we looked at John Bostic when he came back, right? He looked like a fish out of water because the game – it just got by him, if that makes sense. So these linebackers now, these guys are shaped like safeties. They built like safeties. They run like safeties. The game has changed. So I would say you only need two really strong linebackers. And I would definitely be interested in a Tremaine Edmonds, and one of those guys because they're versatile and they can play every down.
If I told you Tremaine Edmonds cost, say, $15 million a year, and Holcomb at 8.5, which do you prefer?
Oh my God! Knowing that we got to pay Daron Payne, and I'm a guy that wants to pay Daron Payne. Let me put it that way.
Right.
If we don't, I would go after Tremaine. The leadership, the experience of being on those Buffalo Bills teams, those defenses. I mean, things like that can be quantified, right? We really put a number on that. So. Cole's definitely played well. Nothing against Cole. He's been a leader. He stepped up. I love the mullet. It's a big hit. But it just depends on what direction the team wants to go. If we're trying to keep Daron Payne, Cole's the obvious choice. If not, you might look into it, Edmonds.
It's interesting, Robert. When you look at a guy like Cam Curl, not a ton of production on the stat sheet. I mean, I don't think he's had an interception.
No,
yet. I don't think no forced fumbles. He's not even picking up fumbles. But the research is there. I mean, guys like Matthew Paris did the big article where, it's just you go from like the bottom 20 in defense up into the top 5 in defensive efficiency when he's on the field. How does that work? It's not usual for it to be that way.
Yeah, I mean, a guy like Cam Curl, obviously, later round draft pick, and if you look around the league is primarily made up of later round draft picks and guys of that nature. So you can tell the guy does his homework. He just brings a different swag to that back half of the defense. Makes me upset that we didn't play him sooner, if that makes sense. So I think last year was his first year kind of getting the reins, but only going to get better. Now it's just a question of who do you pair him with? Or what do you do at that other spot? But Cameron Curl, again, a guy whose value can't be quantified to the back half of that defense. You can tell he's a leader, even as young as he is. So definitely got to keep him around. I think he's up to be paid next year,
right? Next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they're hoping that him and Forrest maybe can stick together for a while because Forrest had a pretty big breakout year. You didn't see it from Forrest?
I did, but I'm just not sold on it. I still think you be aggressive and bring in some competition and try to figure out, where exactly does he fit? Is it his job to lose? I think he played well last year at times. He definitely did. He brought it, some big hits. I just, you got to stay aggressive on that back end and try to figure out who fits where. I mean, even St. Juice, a lot of people are sold on him. I hadn't seen enough. It's things of that nature. I want to bring in competition to see, is this guy going to fill out to what we thought he could be at 6'3", with the ability to run and have long arms. So you still got to stay aggressive and bring in that competition to compete.
It's Super Bowl week. Are you a Radio Row guy? Have you been before? Do you like it?
I have not, so it's definitely one of the things that I want to experience. I've 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 seen it on video, and I heard it was crazy
Yeah.
all over the place. But it's something I want to experience.
Yeah, me too. I had the opportunity to go this year and couldn't work out the travel stuff. And I see the guys I was supposed to go with down there, and they're having a good time. I gotta check that one off my list at some point. It's to me, it's the game is interesting. Two teams that had good quarterbacks that let them go for an opportunity at great quarterbacks. I think we're looking at the best team in the league in the Eagles against the best player in the league in Mahomes. I think the last time I checked, it was still Eagles at about 1.5 favorite. Who do you like and why?
Oh man, we consistently count out. Well, we're not counting out Mahomes, but on paper, it looks like he has less weapons. Uh, what they've done with their offensive scheme is spreading the ball around, so you can't hone it in on just one guy. You can take Kelsey away, but Scantling might get you. You know, Juju might get you, whatever the case may be. But they've done a good job of spreading the ball around. The Eagles' defense, I think, is just ridiculous. There's not many defensive lines that compare to ours. I would say they're right there, definitely right there. It depends on how they get to Mahomes. I think Reddick is going to be a big factor in this game. I got the Eagles.
Amazing that they were able to pick up Chauncey Gardner-Webb and Hassan Reddick in one offseason. Again, we're not in the business of giving kudos to the Eagles on this program, but man, that offseason that Roseman put together was just incredible. And you're right. They run that defensive line in waves. They're going to attack them, and as much money as the Chiefs have spent on that offensive line since the last time they were in the Super Bowl, I think they're in trouble against this defensive line for sure.
Yeah, I better hope that ankle is fully healed for Mahomes. He can definitely do some magic, but it's going to be a lot of running and moving around.
The fact that he was able to go 1 week after the high ankle sprain, I mean, I'm sure you know better than most, but that's not an injury that you're supposed to be able to run on after a week, not after a couple of weeks. It was impressive. As a linebacker, explain something to me before we get out of here.
Yep.
Travis Kelce, I mean, they game plan for Travis Kelce, and he still stays open. And I don't how is it? Because I mean, he's not a young man anymore. I mean, he's like in his upper 30s now, and he's still just running high dudes.
So Jason Witten taught me a lot just from playing against, watching him on film. His speed wasn't non-existent, but what guys like that do, obviously Travis Kelce still has some of that majority of his athletic ability and just a phenomenal route runner when you look at his footwork. It's the contact, right? So, and by that I mean this is what a lot of people don't really pay attention to. As a linebacker, you're preconditioned to believe I got to hit. As that guy's coming off the line within that 5 yards, I'm going to get a shove on him. And that contact in itself may actually help get him open if I'm bracketing him with somebody else. And now he's in a spot where that guy couldn't expect him to be post shove. On the one-on-ones, we again believe as linebackers that you hit a guy and you don't have to cover him. At least that's the thought process. You hit him, you ain't got to cover him. So you create that contact, but guys like Kelce have the footwork and the core strength to absorb that hit and then use your own momentum against you. So, and you can go watch the film. I'm sure guys have tried to bracket him, push him off course, get him off his route. He turns it into something else, and then that relationship with Mahomes where, he knows where Kelsey's going to be is second to none. So those are the type of things that get guys like that open where they don't really have the athletic ability that they used to have, but they still possess the route running savvy and the footwork. So
what give me a score prediction for the
you gonna put me on the spot, Doug? Come on, man.
It's Friday. Here we go.
I thought we were boys.
While you're thinking about the score, did you like the way they set up the Pro Bowl this year?
Yes.
It's more of the skills challenge. I did too.
Where guys were able to bring so much more personality to it. and then you felt like you got to know the player through watching whatever skill they were competing in. So I actually like it, especially the golf aspect of it. I'm starting to dive into that a little bit more. So
Okay.
getting excited about that. But let's say 31-28. Nah, hold up. Let me redo that one because I feel like that defense is gonna make a few more. I'll say 35-28. Let me put it that way. I got you. 35-28. Oh,
Eagles.
yeah, Eagles.
Does it pain you to say that?
It do, but it don't bother me if they win because
Yeah.
they're gonna tear up their own city again. So more trash than they do. they they gonna burn down their city again if they win. So, but nah, man, they a phenomenal team. They've put it all together this year. Jalen is killing. The only thing that could get in their way is lack of experience, but they have enough veterans that were on that Super Bowl winning team that beat the Patriots to still, have some discipline about themselves. So
I like Jalen as long as they're not forced to make him be the reason they win, throw the ball 40 times.
Facts, yeah.
Then I'm with you. I think the Eagles they just have more talent.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll take Mahomes as the best player in the league, but I think overall they got more talent.
Absolutely.
Robert, I appreciate you, man. Have a great. You watch the Super Bowl at home, or you're a go out for the Super Bowl kind of guy?
I watch it at home, man. You know, the older you get, you enjoy being at home. People are crazy.
Yes, I do. All right, thanks, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, man. Have a good one.
You too.